The morning begins slowly in a medieval village, the kind of slow that feels almost heavy. The sun does not rush into the sky, it creeps upward, taking its time, as if it has nowhere else to be. A thin mist rests over the fields, soft and pale, covering the ground like a blanket that forgot to leave. The air is cool, and everything smells faintly of damp soil, wood smoke, and animals that live much closer to people than they do today. There are no clocks to check and no bells ringing to announce the hour. People wake up when the light changes, when the cold becomes uncomfortable, or when the sounds outside grow louder. Somewhere nearby, a chicken is already awake, and very proud of it. The chicken makes sure everyone knows this by producing a loud and unnecessary noise. This sound is not special. It happens every morning. Still, it works. People begin to move. A wooden door creaks open, slowly and carefully, because it always creaks, and there is no point pretending it will stop. A man steps outside, rubbing his eyes and stretching his arms. His clothes are simple, worn, and practical. Nothing is clean in the modern sense, but everything is used to it. His feet touch the cold ground, and he pauses for a moment, breathing in the air, already tired and the day has barely started. Inside another house, a small fire is coming back to life. A woman crouches near it, blowing gently and adding bits of wood. A pot sits above the flame. It is the same pot used every day. It has cooked almost everything this family has eaten for years. The pot does not complain. It just waits. Something will go into it soon. Something always does. Around the village, other small movements begin. Someone carries water in a bucket that leaks just a little. Someone else feeds animals with scraps saved from the night before. Children are still sleeping, wrapped in rough blankets, unaware that their day will soon involve work, not lessons. Life here is quiet, but not calm. There is always something that needs to be done. Food is already on everyone's mind. Not food in a fun way, not food as a choice or a craving, food as a problem that needs solving, again and again, every single day. What can be eaten today? What is left from yesterday? What did not spoil overnight? These are the questions that matter. Near the houses, chickens move freely. They peck at the ground, scratch the dirt, and chase insects that no one else wants. They are not pets, they are not special. They are simply there, like furniture that moves and makes noise. People step around them without thinking. The chickens belong to the household, but they also seem to belong to the village itself. Vegetables exist here too, but they are quieter. They sit in small garden plots behind homes or near the edge of fields. Leafy greens, roots, maybe a few onions. They grow slowly, and not always successfully. Sometimes they fail, sometimes bugs eat them, sometimes the weather decides it does not care about anyone's plans. Vegetables require patience, attention, and a bit of luck, which is not always available. Chickens, on the other hand, are much more dependable. They walk around, find their own food, and somehow manage to survive in conditions that would make most things give up. They do not need rich soil, they do not need perfect weather. They eat scraps, insects, and whatever they can find. They turn very little into something useful, which is impressive when you think about it. As the morning continues, the woman by the fire cracks an egg into the pot. The shell goes into a pile nearby. Nothing is wasted if it can be helped. The egg is small, but it is valuable. It adds thickness and warmth to whatever is cooking. No one talks about protein or nutrition, but everyone understands that this food will help them work longer and feel stronger. No one asks why they eat chickens so often. It is simply normal. It has always been this way, as far as anyone can remember. Chickens provide eggs and sometimes meat, and sometimes both. Vegetables are there too, but they feel less reliable. They are helpful, but not comforting. They do not cluck or walk around or remind people that they exist. The man from earlier returns with a small bundle of sticks for the fire. He glances toward the chickens, counting them without meaning to. He knows exactly how many there are. Losing one matters. Gaining one matters too. Chickens are a kind of quiet security, not exciting, but reassuring. As the village fully wakes up, the sounds increase slightly. Footsteps, murmured voices, the soft clatter of tools being picked up. The smell of cooking drifts through the air. It is not a rich smell, but it is familiar. Familiar smells are important. They make people feel like things are still working, still continuing, still holding together. Vegetables will likely appear later in the day, maybe chopped into a stew or tossed into the pot for flavor. They are helpers, not stars. Chickens, however, already feel central. Even when they are not eaten, they are part of the plan. Eggs in the morning, maybe broth in the evening, maybe nothing today, but something soon. This morning is not special. That is the point. This is an ordinary day. And ordinary days are where history really lives, not in castles or grand halls, but in moments like this, where people decide what to eat based on what they trust, what they have, and what has worked before. The village does not know it yet, but this simple morning holds the answer to a much larger question. Why did people in medieval times eat chicken more than vegetables? The answer does not begin with big ideas or clever arguments. It begins here, in the mist, with sore backs, empty stomachs, noisy birds, and a pot waiting patiently over a small fire. And as the sun climbs a little higher, the chickens continue their important work of doing absolutely nothing impressive, while quietly shaping the daily life of the medieval world. In the medieval world, food was not something people talked about with excitement. It was not a hobby, and it was not a passion. Food was a task. It was something that had to be solved, like fixing a roof or finding firewood. People did not ask what they wanted to eat. They asked what they could eat, and more importantly, what would keep them going until the next day. Food meant survival. It meant strength for work. It meant warmth during cold mornings and enough energy to stand, walk, lift, and carry. Eating was practical, not emotional. No one sat down and wondered if they were in the mood for something light. They ate what was there, what had not gone bad, and what their body already trusted. Most people lived very close to hunger. Even on good days, there was not much extra. A bad harvest, a few sick animals, or a stretch of poor weather could change everything. Because of this, food choices were shaped by fear. Fear of running out, fear of weakness, fear of eating the wrong thing and getting sick when help was far away. Meals were simple and repetitive. Eating the same thing over and over was normal. In fact, it was comforting. Familiar food felt safe. If something had worked yesterday, it would probably work today. New or unusual foods were not exciting. They were suspicious. People trusted what their parents ate and their grandparents before them. Food also had to match the rhythm of the day. Mornings were for work, not long meals. Food needed to be quick to prepare and easy to digest. A pot could sit over a fire while people did other tasks. Ingredients that could be thrown in without much thought were valued. This is where chickens quietly fit into everyday life. Eggs did not need grinding, soaking, or long preparation. They were ready when people were. Vegetables, on the other hand, often needed more effort. Some had to be cleaned carefully, others needed long cooking to make them soft enough. Roots had to be dug up. Greens had to be watched closely so they did not spoil or become bitter. This extra effort mattered in a world where time and energy were limited. Food was also shaped by the seasons. In spring and summer, there might be more variety. In winter, choices became narrow and boring. People ate but could last. Foods that could survive cold weather or storage were more important than foods that were only good for a short time. Chickens, alive and walking around, were like moving storage. Vegetables could not do that. There was also no clear separation between food and work. Eating was often done quickly, sometimes standing, sometimes while doing something else. A bowl of stew might be shared among several people. Everyone knew their place and their portion. No one expected to feel full in the modern sense. Feeling less hungry was good enough. Food also needed to be predictable. Medieval people did not have doctors nearby or easy cures. If food caused stomach pain or weakness, that could be dangerous. Because of this, people avoided foods that felt uncertain. Some vegetables were known to cause trouble if not prepared correctly. Chickens, eggs, and broths felt safer. They had been eaten for generations. Another important part of medieval food was heat. Hot food mattered. Cold food was not appealing, especially in a cold climate. A hot pot bubbling over a fire felt reassuring. Chicken fit perfectly into this system. It made broth, it added flavor. Even small amounts could change plain water into something more filling. Vegetables often played a supporting role. They added taste or thickness, but they were rarely the center of a meal. A meal without vegetables could still feel complete. A meal without something warm and filling felt empty. Chicken helped solve that problem. Food also carried meaning, even if people did not talk about it openly. Eating well meant you were managing to survive. Eating poorly meant something had gone wrong. Chickens were a sign that things were still working. They laid eggs, they could be counted, they could be protected. Vegetables were more uncertain. A single bad week could ruin them. There was also the issue of storage. Fresh food did not stay fresh for long. Without cooling or sealing, food spoiled quickly. Vegetables were especially sensitive. Meat could be cooked, dried, or turned into broth. Eggs lasted longer than leafy greens. Chickens could be kept alive until needed. This made them very valuable. Food was also social, but in a quiet way. Families ate together when they could. What was served showed what the household had access to. Chickens were common enough that they did not feel special, but reliable enough to feel important. Vegetables were appreciated, but they did not carry the same weight. People did not think in terms of balance or variety. They thought in terms of enough or not enough. Enough strength to work, enough warmth to sleep, enough food to last. Chickens helped answer those needs in a way vegetables often could not. By the end of the day, when people sat near the fire, tired and sore, food was not about pleasure, it was about recovery. A warm bowl, a familiar taste, and the quiet knowledge that tomorrow's food problem was not completely unsolved yet. Understanding this idea of food is important. Without it, the choices of medieval peoples seem strange, but when food is seen as fuel, safety, and routine, their habits begin to make sense. Chickens were not chosen because they were better, they were chosen because they worked. And in a world where every day required effort just to continue, food that worked was the best kind of food there was. In the medieval world, vegetables existed, but they did not enjoy a very good reputation. They were around, they were eaten, and they were grown, but people did not look at them with excitement or trust. Vegetables were useful, but they were rarely loved. To many medieval people, vegetables felt like something you dealt with, not something you celebrated. Part of the problem was uncertainty. Vegetables came from the ground, and the ground was full of surprises. Some plants were helpful, others were bitter. Some were harmless, others could make you feel very sick if prepared the wrong way. Knowledge about plants was passed down by memory and habit, not books or labels. If someone forgot how to prepare a vegetable properly, that mistake could be painful. Because of this, vegetables carried a quiet sense of risk. They looked harmless, but they could cause trouble. A root pulled from the soil did not explain itself. You had to know it. You had to trust it. And trust was not given easily when food was already scarce. Vegetables were also linked to hardship. During times when food was low, people relied more heavily on plants. Thin soups, watery stews, and meals stretched with greens were signs that things were not going well. When vegetables became the main part of a meal, it often meant that something else was missing. This association stayed strong. Even when vegetables were plentiful, they reminded people of lean times. They were useful fillers, but not symbols of comfort. Chickens, eggs, and meat felt more reassuring. They felt solid. Vegetables felt temporary. Another issue was how vegetables behaved once harvested. Many of them did not last long. Leaves wilted quickly, roots could rot. If storage conditions were poor, a pile of vegetables could become useless in a very short time. This made people cautious. They did not want to rely too heavily on food that might disappear overnight. Cooking vegetables also took effort. Some needed long boiling, others needed careful cleaning. Dirt hid everywhere. Bugs came along for the ride. This extra work mattered in a life already filled with tasks. When energy was limited, foods that required less effort were preferred. Vegetables were rarely eaten raw. Raw food felt unsafe. Cooking was seen as a way to make food gentle and reliable. But cooking vegetables for a long time often removed their texture and taste. They became soft, dull, and easy to forget. This did not help their image. Vegetables also lacked personality, at least compared to animals. Chickens were noisy, they moved, they interacted with people, even if that interaction was mostly running away. Vegetables just sat there. They did not announce themselves. They did not remind you they existed until you needed them. In many meals, vegetables were treated like background noise. They filled space in the pot. They made broth thicker. They added a bit of taste, but they were rarely the reason for the meal. If vegetables were missing, people noticed less than if eggs or meat were missing. Vegetables were also harder to trade. They spoiled quickly and lost value fast. Chickens and eggs could be exchanged more easily. This affected how people viewed importance. Food that could be traded felt more real, more valuable, more worth protecting. Even gardens were treated carefully. People planted vegetables, but they did not rely on them fully. Gardens were small and close to the home, watched closely. They were helpful, but not trusted completely. A sudden change in weather could ruin months of work. Some vegetables also cause discomfort if eaten too often. Gas, stomach pain, or weakness were blamed on certain plants. Without clear understanding of why this happened, people simply avoided repeating the experience. Word spread quickly in small communities. A bad meal was remembered. Because of all this, vegetables settled into a quiet role. They were part of life, but not at the center. They were accepted, not admired. They helped stretch meals and add variety, but they were not the foundation people leaned on when things became difficult. This does not mean medieval people hated vegetables. They appreciated them when they worked well. A good harvest was welcomed. A fresh addition to the pot was useful. But appreciation is not the same as trust, and trust was everything when survival was involved. By the end of the day, when people thought about food for tomorrow, vegetables were considered optional support. Chickens were considered a plan. This difference shaped how often each appeared on the table. Understanding this quiet suspicion helps explain a lot. Medieval people did not choose chicken over vegetables because they disliked plants. They chose chicken because vegetables felt uncertain, fragile, and unreliable in a world that already had enough problems. In a life where every meal mattered, food needed to feel safe. Vegetables tried their best, but chickens simply felt easier to believe in. In medieval villages, chickens were not special animals. That is exactly why they were so important. They were everywhere, quietly existing alongside people, not demanding much attention, yet always offering something useful. You did not need a large farm, wide fields, or expensive tools to keep chickens. You just needed a little space, a bit of patience, and the ability to tolerate noise early in the morning. Chickens fit perfectly into medieval life because medieval life was crowded, busy, and limited. Most people lived in small homes with very little land. Big animals required big spaces and lots of food. Chickens did not. They wandered freely, squeezing through small gaps, scratching at the dirt, and somehow finding meals in places where humans saw nothing at all. They ate leftovers, insects, weeds, and kitchen scraps. Things that had no other use suddenly became valuable because chickens could turn them into eggs or meat. This made chickens feel almost magical, even if no one described them that way. They gave something back without asking much in return. Another reason chickens were everywhere was their size. A chicken was easy to handle. If one escaped, it could usually be caught. If one got sick, the loss was small compared to losing a cow or a pig. Chickens were low-risk animals in a high-risk world. This mattered deeply to people who could not afford big mistakes. Chickens also multiplied quickly. Eggs led to chicks, and chicks grew into more chickens. A household could slowly increase its number of birds without spending money or trading valuable goods. This made chickens feel like a growing safety net. Each new chicken meant more eggs, more food options, and a little more peace of mind. Their behavior also helped. Chickens stayed close to home. They did not wander far into danger. They returned at night. They did not need to be chased or herded for long distances. In a world without fences everywhere, this made life easier. People had enough things to worry about already. Chickens also adapted well to different environments. Cold weather, warm weather, dry areas, damp areas. Chickens managed somehow. They were not picky. As long as they had a bit of shelter and something to eat, they survived. This made them perfect for medieval Europe, where conditions changed often and unpredictably. Because chickens were so common, people learned to understand them well. They knew their sounds, their habits, and their moods. This familiarity built trust. When an animal is part of daily life, it feels dependable. Vegetables could fail silently overnight. Chickens made noise when something was wrong. Chickens also fit neatly into daily routines. Eggs could be collected in the morning or afternoon. Chickens could be checked while doing other tasks. They did not require long, focused attention. This allowed people to manage many responsibilities at once, which was necessary in a labor-heavy society. There was also the matter of timing. Chickens offered flexibility. Eggs appeared regularly without needing to wait for a season to end. Meat could be taken when necessary, not all at once. This control over timing mattered. People could decide when to use what they had, instead of being forced by a harvest schedule. Chickens also worked well with communal life. In villages, chickens often wandered between homes. Ownership was understood, but boundaries were loose. This shared presence made chickens feel like part of the community itself. They were always nearby, always visible, always reminding people that food was close. From a practical point of view, chickens were also efficient. They converted very little into something valuable. They did not need special feed. They did not compete heavily with humans for food. They cleaned up scraps and pests, improving living conditions while also feeding themselves. This efficiency made chickens feel honest. They earned their place. They were not extra. They were useful. Medieval people valued usefulness above almost everything else. Chickens passed this test every day without complaint. Over time, chickens became so normal that people stopped thinking about why they kept them. They were simply part of the landscape. Like wells, fires, or tools, chickens belonged. Their presence shaped meals, habits, and expectations. When people thought about food, chickens were already included in the plan. Eggs in the pot, bones for broth, feathers for small uses, nothing was wasted. Chickens fit into the idea that everything should serve a purpose. Vegetables could be helpful, but chickens felt complete. They offered multiple things from one source. This made them feel efficient in a way vegetables could not match. One chicken could provide food over time, not just once. By the end of the day, when chickens settled down and people gathered indoors, their presence was still felt. Tomorrow's eggs were already forming. Tomorrow's meals were partly secured. This quiet promise mattered. Chickens were everywhere because they solved problems without creating new ones. They fit into tight spaces, busy lives, and uncertain futures. They were simple answers to complicated days. And in a medieval world where survival depended on small, reliable solutions, chickens earned their place by being exactly what people needed without ever trying to be impressive. In medieval life, chickens were not kept mainly for meat. That part surprises many people today. The true daily value of a chicken was not found at the end of its life, but during it. Eggs came first. Meat came later, and only when needed. This way of thinking shaped how often people ate chicken and why it appeared so often in everyday meals. Eggs were one of the most reliable foods available. They appeared regularly, without much warning, and without needing to be planted, watered, or harvested. A chicken simply did its job, usually somewhere inconvenient, and left behind something useful. People learned to check the usual spots, baskets, corners, and dark areas. Finding an egg felt like a small success, even if it happened almost every day. Eggs were easy to cook. They did not need long preparation. They did not need sharp tools. They did not need much fuel. An egg could be dropped into a pot, mixed with grain, or added to a stew. It improved almost anything it touched. In a world where cooking fuel was precious, this mattered a lot. Eggs also fit well into the rhythm of daily work. They could be eaten quickly in the morning or used to strengthen a simple meal later in the day. They did not slow anyone down. They did not require planning. They were ready when people were. Another important thing about eggs was how they made people feel. After eating eggs, people felt warm and steady. Their stomachs felt settled. This feeling was trusted. Medieval people paid close attention to how food affected their bodies. They remembered what worked and repeated it. Eggs worked. Eggs also helped stretch other foods. A little grain became more filling with an egg added. A thin soup became thicker. A small amount of meat felt more satisfying. This ability to make meals last longer made eggs extremely valuable. Because eggs were so useful, chickens were protected carefully. Killing a chicken too early meant losing future eggs. People understood this clearly. A chicken was more valuable alive than dead, at least for a while. Meat was a one-time reward. Eggs were ongoing. This is why chicken meat was not eaten casually. It was eaten with purpose. A chicken might be killed if it stopped laying eggs, became sick, or if food was especially short. Meat was a backup plan, not the first choice. When a chicken was finally eaten, it was used carefully. Nothing was wasted. Meat was cooked slowly. Bones were saved for broth. Fat was collected if possible. Even the smallest parts were considered useful. This careful use made chicken meat feel important, not every day. Eggs also stored better than many vegetables. They lasted longer, especially if kept cool and dry. This made them a reliable option when fresh food was limited. Vegetables could spoil quickly. Eggs gave people a little more time. Chickens also laid eggs in different seasons, depending on conditions. Even when gardens struggled, eggs might still appear. This consistency made people depend on them more and more. Over time, eggs became part of what people expected from life. Eggs were also shared within families. Children ate them, older people ate them. They were soft, easy to chew, and gentle on the body. This made them suitable for everyone. Few foods could claim that. From a practical point of view, eggs required very little explanation. Everyone knew how to use them. Knowledge did not need to be written down. It was learned by watching. This simplicity helped eggs become a core food. There was also an emotional side to eggs, even if people did not talk about it openly. Finding eggs meant things were still working. Chickens were healthy. The household was stable. These small signs mattered in a difficult world. Compared to vegetables, eggs felt more predictable. Vegetables could fail for many reasons. Eggs appeared quietly, without drama. This reliability built trust over time. Trust became habit. Eggs also worked well with other foods. They mixed easily with grain, meat, and vegetables. They did not compete, they supported. This made them flexible and valuable. Because eggs were so central, chickens became part of daily thinking. People planned meals around them. They checked nests before starting work. They counted eggs without writing numbers down. This quiet awareness became normal. In many ways, eggs shaped the medieval diet more than meat did. They filled gaps. They softened hunger. They supported work. Chicken meat was important, but eggs were constant.
Vegetables played their role, but eggs felt safer. Eggs were familiar. Eggs were trusted. Eggs were expected. By the end of the day, when people thought about tomorrow's food, eggs were already included in their hopes. A chicken settling down for the night was not just resting, it was preparing tomorrow's meal. This is why chickens mattered so much, even before meat was considered. They offered daily value, steady support, and quiet reliability. In a world where certainty was rare, eggs were one of the few things people could count on. And so, long before a chicken ever became a meal, it had already earned its place at the center of medieval life, one simple egg at a time.
Vegetable gardens did exist in medieval life, but they were not the rich, overflowing spaces people imagine today. They were small, close to the house, and carefully watched. A garden was not a place of abundance, it was a place of effort. Every plant needed attention, and even then, success was never guaranteed. Most gardens were worked by hand. There were no machines to loosen soil or remove stones. Digging was slow and tiring. The soil itself was often poor, full of rocks, roots, and stubborn clumps. Making space for vegetables meant constant labor, bending and pulling and hoping the ground would cooperate. Weather played a large role in deciding what a garden would give. Too much rain turned soil into mud and caused roots to rot. Too little rain dried everything out. A late frost could destroy young plants overnight. A sudden heat wave could do the same. Gardens depended on conditions people could not control. Because of this, vegetables felt uncertain. You could do everything right and still lose the harvest. Seeds might fail to sprout, leaves might grow weak. Pests could appear without warning and eat everything before anyone noticed. Birds, insects, and small animals all saw gardens as free meals. Protecting a garden took time. Fences were simple and often ineffective. Watching the garden meant less time for other work. In a world where every hour mattered, this was a serious problem. Chickens, by comparison, watched themselves. Vegetables also grew slowly. Weeks passed before anything could be eaten. During that time, people still needed food. Chickens and eggs filled that gap. A garden was a future promise, not a present solution. Even when vegetables did grow well, the amount was limited. Garden space was small, families were large. A good harvest might improve meals for a while, but it rarely lasted long. Vegetables were additions, not foundations. Storage was another challenge. Many vegetables spoiled quickly once harvested. Leaves wilted, roots softened. Without proper storage spaces, much of the harvest had to be eaten quickly or lost. This forced people to stretch meals carefully. Preserving vegetables was difficult. Drying required good weather and time. Pickling required supplies and knowledge. Mistakes meant waste. Chickens avoided this problem by staying alive until needed. Gardens also demanded planning. Seeds had to be saved from previous harvests. Planting had to be timed carefully. Mistakes could not always be fixed. Chickens required much less planning. They existed in the present, not the future. There was also the problem of labor balance. Gardening was often done alongside many other tasks. Fields needed attention, animals needed care, fires needed fuel. When time ran short, gardens suffered. Chickens continued regardless. Vegetables could also be tiring to prepare. Washing dirt off roots took water and effort. Cutting and cooking took time. Some vegetables needed long boiling to become soft. This used fuel, which was always limited. Because of these limits, vegetables were treated cautiously. People used them when available, but they did not depend on them fully. They were useful but fragile. A garden failure could not be allowed to cause disaster. Chickens balanced this risk. If the garden failed, eggs still appeared. If vegetables spoiled, chickens remained. This safety net shaped food choices over time. Gardens also changed with the seasons. Some vegetables only grew at certain times. This meant long periods without fresh plants. Chickens ignored seasons as much as possible. They adjusted better. Children helped in gardens, but their work was inconsistent.
Weather, sickness, or other duties interrupted progress. Chickens did not need supervision from small hands. Another limitation was knowledge. Not all vegetables were well understood. Some plants looked similar but behaved differently. Mistakes happened. People remembered bad experiences and avoided repeating them. Because of all this, gardens felt like careful experiments. Chickens felt like stable partners. People trusted partners more than experiments. Vegetables were appreciated when they succeeded. A good harvest brought relief and variety, but success never erased memory of failure. People planned for the worst, not the best. By evening, when people looked at their gardens, they saw effort, hope, and risk. When they looked at their chickens, they saw movement, sound, and certainty. This difference mattered. Over time, it shaped habits and expectations. Vegetables became helpers. Chickens became anchors. Gardens remained important, but limited. They filled gaps but could not carry the full weight of survival. Chickens quietly carried more than their share. In the medieval world, trust was built slowly. Vegetables asked for patience and luck. Chickens asked for scraps and space. People chose the simpler deal. And so, while gardens continued to exist behind homes and near fields, they never replaced chickens. They worked alongside them, supporting meals but rarely leading them. In a life built on uncertainty, food that stayed alive until needed felt safer than food that waited silently in the soil, hoping the world would be kind.
In medieval times, food was closely tied to how the body felt after eating. People did not measure calories or nutrients, but they paid close attention to strength, warmth, and endurance. If a food helped someone work longer, walk farther, or feel steady through the day, it earned a good reputation. Over time, meat, especially chicken, became linked with these feelings of strength and comfort. After a long day of labor, people wanted food that felt solid. They wanted something that stayed with them, something that made their stomach feel settled and their body feel supported. Meat provided that feeling. Even small amounts added to a meal could change how it was experienced. A thin pot of liquid became more filling when bones or meat were added. Chicken was especially valued because it was gentle. It did not feel heavy or difficult to eat. It warmed the body without making it feel slow. This balance mattered. People needed energy, but they also needed to keep moving. Food that made them too tired or uncomfortable was avoided. Broth made from chicken was one of the most comforting foods available. It was warm, easy to swallow, and soothing. It could be eaten in the morning, at night, or during times when stronger foods felt like too much. Even when there was very little meat, the broth carried the idea of nourishment. People noticed that after eating meals with chicken, they felt steadier. They could lift tools more easily. They could walk longer distances. These observations shaped habits. When something worked, it was repeated. Over time, chicken became associated with reliability. Vegetables did not always produce the same feeling. Some left people hungry soon after eating. Others caused discomfort. Even when vegetables were filling, they did not always provide the warmth people wanted, especially in colder seasons. This difference mattered more than taste. Comfort was also emotional. Familiar food helped people feel safe. Chicken had been part of meals for generations. It was linked to home, routine, and continuity. Eating chicken felt like things were normal, even when life was difficult. Meals were often eaten after long hours of work. At that point, patience was low. People wanted food that delivered comfort quickly. Chicken broth, stews, and simple preparations met that need without delay. Another reason chicken felt comforting was its predictability. When prepared properly, it behaved the same way every time. It softened, released flavor, and blended well with other ingredients. Vegetables could be unpredictable. One batch might be fine, another might not. Chicken also fit well into shared meals. When a pot was shared among several people, meat helped make the portion feel fair. Even a small piece in each bowl made the meal feel complete. Without it, meals could feel thin.
There was also the matter of recovery. After sickness or exhaustion, people often turned to simple, warm foods. Chicken broth was easy to digest and did not demand much effort from the body. It felt like a step back towards strength. Over time, this use built trust. Chicken became the food people thought of when strength was needed. Vegetables were helpful, but they were not the first answer during hard times. This does not mean meat was eaten in large amounts. It was still used carefully, but its presence carried meaning beyond quantity. A little went a long way in shaping how a meal was felt. Chicken also offered comfort because it could be prepared in many small ways. Bits could be added to grain, bones could flavor water. Nothing needed to be wasted. This flexibility made people feel prepared. When people thought about food for the next day, they thought about how they would feel while working. Meals were planned around endurance, not enjoyment. Chicken helped meet that goal quietly. Vegetables were still eaten, but they often played a supporting role. They filled space and added variety, but they did not define strength. Chicken did. As seasons changed and work demands shifted, this pattern remained. During cold days or heavy labor, chicken-based meals appeared more often. People listened to their bodies and trusted what experience taught them. Comfort was not a luxury in medieval life. It was a necessity. Anything that made life a little easier, even briefly, became important. Chicken earned that place through consistency. By the end of the day, when people sat near the fire with tired bodies and aching hands, a warm meal with chicken offered more than food. It offered relief. It offered familiarity. It offered the feeling that tomorrow might be manageable. This association between meat and strength did not come from theory. It came from daily experience. People ate, worked, and remembered. Over generations, these memories shaped habits. Chicken became more than just food. It became part of how people understood endurance. It was not dramatic or rare. It was quiet support. In a world where every task demanded effort, food that gave strength without complication was valued deeply. Chicken did exactly that, one simple meal at a time.
Medieval life followed patterns, not written schedules or neat calendars, but habits that repeated again and again. People woke, worked, ate, and slept in rhythms shaped by the land, the weather, and long-standing customs. Food followed these rhythms closely. There were days when people ate more, days when they ate less, and days when meals were deliberately kept simple. These patterns were not random. They helped households manage supplies, stretch food, and avoid running out. Eating less on certain days meant eating enough on others. This quiet balance kept people going through long weeks and uncertain seasons. On lighter food days, meals were intentionally plain. Pots held thinner stews, portions were smaller. The goal was not to feel full, but to get through the day without using too much. These days trained people to live with less, so harder times did not feel as shocking. Chicken fit easily into these routines. It was flexible. Eggs could appear even on light days without breaking the pattern. A little broth could warm a meal without turning it into something heavy. Chicken allowed people to adjust without disruption. Vegetables appeared often during these lighter meals, but they rarely stood alone. They filled space and added bulk, but they did not always satisfy. To make these meals feel complete, people often relied on eggs or small amounts of chicken flavor. Food rules were not written down. They were learned by watching. Children noticed which days meals were thinner. They learned when to expect eggs and when to expect only bread and vegetables. This knowledge became instinct. These routines also helped manage expectations. If everyone knew that certain days meant simpler food, there was less disappointment. The meal was doing its job by following the pattern, not by impressing anyone. Chickens helped smooth these routines. Because eggs arrived regularly, they gave households flexibility. If vegetables were scarce, eggs helped. If grain was low, broth helped. Chickens made food rules easier to follow without stress. Vegetables alone struggled to fill this role. They depended too much on timing and availability. If gardens failed or storage ran low, vegetable-based meals felt thin and unsatisfying.
Chickens offered backup. These routines also shaped taste. People became used to simple flavors. They did not expect variety every day. Familiar food felt right. Chicken-based meals fit this expectation perfectly. Another part of these routines involved sharing. In villages, people often helped one another during shortages. Eggs and chickens were easier to share than vegetables, which spoiled quickly. This made chicken feel more social, more connected to community stability. Routine food rules also reduced waste. Eating less on certain days prevented supplies from disappearing too fast. Chickens supported this system by offering steady, predictable food without needing to be consumed all at once. Over time, these habits shaped preference. People became comfortable with chicken appearing again and again. Vegetables remained important, but they were tied to seasons and success. Chickens were tied to routine. Food rules also reduced risk. By limiting rich food at certain times, people avoided using too much fuel or supplies. Chicken could appear in small amounts without upsetting this balance. When routines were followed, households felt organized. When routines broke, anxiety followed. Chicken helped keep routines intact. Vegetables could not always do this. They asked too much from chance and weather. Chickens responded to habit and care. By the end of the day, these food rules felt natural. People did not question them. They trusted patterns that had worked before. Understanding these routines helps explain why chicken stayed central. It fit rules without effort. It respected limits while still offering comfort. In a world built on repetition, food that adapted easily became essential. Chickens did not argue with routine. They supported it quietly, day after day.
In medieval life, food did not wait politely. Once it was harvested or prepared, it immediately began to change, sometimes slowly, sometimes very fast. Spoilage was not a surprise. It was expected. People lived with the constant understanding that food could turn bad at any moment, and when it did, it was not just unpleasant, it was dangerous. Because of this, preservation mattered almost as much as food itself. What could last was trusted. What could not was treated carefully. This way of thinking shaped daily choices, and it quietly pushed chicken ahead of vegetables again and again. Vegetables were especially fragile. Leaves wilted within hours. Roots softened and grew strange smells. Even when vegetables looked fine, they could cause problems if eaten after sitting too long. Without clear signs of safety, people learned to be cautious. A questionable vegetable was often avoided rather than risk illness. Preserving vegetables was possible, but difficult. Drying required dry weather and time. If rain arrived at the wrong moment, the entire effort could fail. Storing roots needed cool, dry spaces that many homes did not have. Mistakes meant waste. Chickens avoided this problem simply by staying alive. As long as a chicken walked around the yard, it was not spoiling. It did not rot. It did not attract mold. It waited patiently until needed. This made chickens feel like the safest form of storage available. Eggs also lasted longer than many vegetables. When kept properly, they stayed usable for days or even weeks. This gave households flexibility. Eggs could be saved for later instead of being eaten immediately. Vegetables rarely offered this option. Meat preservation also existed, but it required effort and skill. Salting, drying, and smoking were common methods. Chicken meat worked well with these techniques in small amounts. It did not require huge facilities or long processing times. Vegetables did not always preserve as well. Some lost flavor. Others became unpleasant. When preservation failed, the result was not just wasted effort, but wasted food. Spoilage was more than inconvenience. Getting sick from food could stop someone from working. In a household that depended on labor, this was serious. People avoided foods that felt risky. Chicken felt familiar and predictable. Another problem with vegetables was timing. When a harvest came in, it often came all at once. People had to eat quickly or preserve quickly. This pressure added stress. Chickens spread their usefulness over time. Chicken broth also helped with preservation indirectly. Boiling food made it safer. Broth could be reheated and reused carefully.
Vegetables added to broth lasted longer than vegetables alone. Bones, often ignored today, were valuable then. Chicken bones could flavor water again and again. This extended the value of meat far beyond the first meal. Vegetables rarely offered this kind of repeat usefulness. There was also the smell test. Medieval people trusted their senses. Spoiled vegetables often smelled bad in confusing ways. Spoiled meat was easier to identify. Clear signals mattered. Fuel also played a role. Cooking food thoroughly made it safer, but fuel was limited. Chicken cooked quickly compared to some vegetables that needed long boiling. This saved wood and time. Because spoilage was common, people preferred foods that forgave mistakes. Chicken allowed for errors. Vegetables did not always. Another quiet advantage of chickens was control. People decided when to use them. Vegetables decided for themselves when they were done. This lack of control made vegetables stressful. In many homes, people planned meals around what needed to be eaten first. Vegetables often went before meat, not because they were preferred, but because they would not last. Chicken waited its turn. Over time, this pattern shaped habits. Vegetables were used quickly and cautiously. Chickens became the steady option for uncertain days. Spoilage also affected sharing. People hesitated to share vegetables that might turn bad. Eggs and chickens were safer to exchange. This strengthened their role in community food systems. Even cooking habits reflected fear of spoilage. Stews were reheated carefully. Ingredients were added slowly. Chicken worked well with this method. Vegetables often broke down. People did not complain much about this. It was simply how life worked. They adapted by trusting what lasted. By evening, when food remained for the next day, people evaluated risk. What would still be safe tomorrow? Often, the answer involved chicken. Understanding this fear explains a lot. Medieval people did not avoid vegetables out of dislike. They avoided uncertainty. Chicken offered peace of mind. It stayed usable. It stayed familiar. It stayed reliable. In a world where food could fail quietly and quickly, the safest choice was the one that waited patiently in the yard, unaware that it was winning the quiet competition for trust.
In medieval times, knowledge about food was practical, local, and sometimes incomplete. People knew what worked because they had seen it work before. They trusted habits more than ideas. When it came to plants, this created a quiet problem. Not all plants were safe, and not all vegetables behaved the same way. This uncertainty made people careful, sometimes overly careful, and that caution shaped what they chose to eat. Plants all looked harmless at first. They sat in the ground, grew slowly, and did not move. But this stillness was misleading. Some plants could cause stomach pain. Others could make people dizzy or weak. A few could do much worse. The danger was not always obvious. Two plants might look similar but act very differently once eaten. Because of this, plant knowledge was treated seriously. It was learned slowly, passed down by watching and remembering. There were no guides or labels. If someone made a mistake, the lesson was remembered for a long time. Stories about bad meals traveled fast in small communities. Vegetables were safer than wild plants, but fear did not disappear completely. Soil conditions could change how a plant behaved. Weather could affect taste and strength. A vegetable grown one year might feel fine. The same plant grown another year might cause discomfort. These changes were confusing. People learned to associate comfort with foods that behaved the same way every time. Chickens were predictable. Eggs were predictable. Vegetables were not always. This difference mattered more than people openly admitted. Another issue was preparation. Some plants needed careful cooking to be safe or pleasant. Undercooking caused trouble. Overcooking made them tasteless. Getting it right took experience and attention. When time was limited, mistakes happened. Chickens required less precision. Eggs could be cooked many ways and still be fine. Meat could be boiled thoroughly and trusted. This flexibility reduced anxiety in the kitchen.
There was also the issue of mixing foods. Some vegetables did not work well together. Some caused discomfort when combined with other ingredients. These reactions were not understood scientifically, but they were noticed. People adjusted by avoiding repetition. Chicken rarely caused these problems. It mixed well with grain, vegetables, and water. It did not surprise anyone. Fear also grew from unfamiliarity. When new plants appeared, or when people traveled, unknown vegetables were treated with suspicion. Chickens were familiar everywhere. A chicken in one village behaved like a chicken in another. This consistency built confidence. Children were taught plant knowledge carefully. They learned what to touch, what to avoid, and what to eat. Mistakes were corrected quickly. This made vegetables feel like something that needed rules. Chickens did not need rules. They were obvious. Another problem with plants was delayed reaction. Sometimes discomfort appeared hours after eating. This made it harder to identify the cause. When this happened, people often blamed the most suspicious ingredient. Vegetables were often that ingredient. Chickens caused immediate and familiar reactions. People knew what to expect. This clarity mattered. Fear also affected quantity. People limited how much vegetable food they ate at once. Small amounts felt safer. Chicken, when available, filled the gap. Over time, this caution turned into habit. Vegetables were used carefully and often sparingly. Chickens were used confidently. This fear of plants was not dramatic, but it was powerful. It shaped habits slowly over generations. Understanding this fear helps explain medieval choices. They did not reject vegetables because they were wrong. They limited them because certainty mattered more than variety. Chicken offered that certainty. It was familiar, forgiving, and easy to understand. In a world where one bad decision could stop work or cause suffering, food that asked fewer questions was always welcome.
In medieval times, food was not just about hunger. It was also about numbers, even if no one wrote those numbers down. Every household constantly calculated, quietly and without paper, what could be kept, what could be traded, and what could be saved for later. This everyday thinking shaped what people ate far more than taste ever did. Chickens fit very well into this quiet economy. They were small, valuable, and flexible. A chicken did not represent a single meal. It represented many future possibilities. Eggs today, eggs tomorrow, meat later if needed. This made chickens feel like a form of living wealth. Vegetables did not work the same way. Once harvested, they began to lose value. Each day they sat unused, they became less useful. A vegetable could not increase itself. It could only disappear. This made it harder to think of vegetables as something stable. Chickens could be counted. People knew how many they had. Losing one mattered. Gaining one mattered. This counting helped people feel in control. Control was important in a world where many things were uncertain. Eggs were especially useful in small exchanges. A few eggs could be traded for bread, help, or small tools. They were light, easy to carry, and widely accepted. Vegetables were harder to trade because they spoiled quickly and varied in quality. Markets were simple. Most trade happened locally. People brought what they had and hoped it would be useful to someone else. Eggs almost always were. Chickens could be traded or borrowed. Vegetables often could not travel far. This made chickens more visible in daily economic life. They appeared in exchanges, favors, and quiet agreements. Over time, this made them feel more important than vegetables, even if vegetables were eaten often. Chickens also represented security. If a household faced trouble, chickens could be sold or exchanged. They acted as a safety net. Vegetables rarely filled this role because they were tied too closely to time and season. Food that doubled as value was trusted more. Chicken offered that double role. Vegetables usually did not. There was also the cost of effort. Growing vegetables required planning, tools, and constant work.
Chickens required care, but much of their work happened on its own. They fed themselves and reproduced naturally. This reduced labor cost. In households where everyone already worked long hours, saving effort mattered. Chickens felt efficient. Vegetables felt demanding. Another part of the economic picture was loss. Losing a vegetable harvest meant losing everything invested in it. Losing one chicken was manageable. This difference affected risk tolerance. People learned to spread risk. They did not rely entirely on gardens. Chickens helped balance failure. This balance shaped diets over time. Eggs also helped stretch expensive foods. Grain could be used more efficiently when combined with eggs. This saved resources. Vegetables did not always have the same effect. Chickens also produced byproducts. Feathers, bones, and fat all had uses. Vegetables left less behind. This made chickens feel like better investments. Economic thinking also affected meal planning. People thought about tomorrow and next week, not just tonight. Chickens fit future thinking. Vegetables fit immediate needs. Even when vegetables were abundant, chickens stayed central because they represented continuity. They connected today to tomorrow. Over time, this quiet economic logic became habit. People did not explain it, they just lived it. Chickens became part of household planning. Vegetables became part of meal preparation. This difference mattered. When people looked at their food supplies, chickens stood out. They moved, made noise, and reminded people of value. Vegetables sat quietly and waited. This visibility reinforced importance. What is seen is remembered. What is remembered is valued. By the end of the day, when people thought about what they had, chickens felt reassuring. They meant options. Vegetables meant timing. Understanding this economic view helps explain medieval diets. Choices were not random. They were careful, even if they looked simple. Chickens offered steady value in a world where stability was rare. Vegetables offered support, but not security.
In medieval life, food quietly spoke for people. It said where they stood, how stable they were, and how well they were managing to survive. No one announced this out loud, but everyone noticed. What appeared in a bowl told a story before a word was spoken. Chicken held a special place in this quiet language. It was common enough that it did not feel fancy, but valuable enough that it felt respectable. Eating chicken meant a household was doing all right. Not rich, not struggling too badly, just steady. In a medieval world, steady was a compliment. Vegetables did not send the same message. They were necessary, but they were often linked to hard times. Meals heavy with vegetables suggested that something was missing. Maybe animals were lost. Maybe eggs were scarce. Maybe work had not gone well. Vegetables alone felt like a sign of limitation. This did not mean people judged each other harshly. Life was difficult for everyone, but people noticed patterns. When chicken appeared regularly, it suggested planning and balance. When it disappeared for long periods, concern followed quietly. Food identity formed early. Children grew up seeing what foods appeared on normal days and what appeared on difficult ones. Over time, they learned what food meant comfort and what food meant survival mode. Chicken usually belonged to comfort. Sharing meals also reinforced this idea. When guests visited, people tried to offer the best they reasonably could. If chicken was available, it often appeared. It showed care and effort without excess. Vegetables alone felt incomplete for such moments. Chicken also helped maintain dignity. Even small portions made a meal feel proper. A bowl of broth with a bit of chicken felt different from a bowl of vegetables and water. The difference was not in size, but in feeling. Vegetables were still respected. They were part of daily life, but they did not define success. They filled space. They helped meals stretch. They were helpers, not symbols. Social identity also shaped what people talked about. People mentioned chickens more than vegetables. Losing a chicken was discussed. Gaining one was celebrated. A garden failure was unfortunate but expected. Losing chickens felt more personal.
This attention shaped value. What people talked about became important. What became important appeared more often on the table. Chicken also crossed social boundaries easily. Wealthier households ate more meat, but chicken still appeared in modest homes. This made it a shared experience. People across different levels of life understood chicken the same way. Vegetables changed meaning depending on context. In large quantities, they suggested struggle. In small amounts, added to other foods, they felt normal. Chicken remained consistent. There was also the issue of pride. Feeding a family well mattered deeply. Chicken helped people feel they were doing their job. Vegetables alone could feel like falling short, even if they were filling. Food identity also affected memory. People remembered meals with chicken more clearly. They remembered them as good days. Vegetable-heavy meals faded into routine. This memory shaped future choices. When possible, people repeated what they remembered as good. Chicken also appeared in moments of care. When someone was tired, weak, or recovering, chicken-based meals often followed. This associated chicken with kindness and attention. Vegetables rarely carried that emotional weight. They were practical, not comforting. Another factor was visibility. Chickens were seen daily. They walked around, made noise, and demanded attention. Vegetables grew quietly. This constant presence kept chicken in people's minds. When something is always visible, it becomes part of identity. Chickens were part of the household's image. Gardens were background. Social status was not about showing off, it was about not falling behind. Chicken helped households stay within the accepted middle ground. Too much meat suggested excess, too little suggested trouble. Chicken, used carefully, sat right in the middle. This balance mattered. Medieval people valued moderation, even if they did not describe it that way. Chicken fit moderation perfectly. Over generations, this thinking settled into habit. People did not question it. Chicken meant stability. Vegetables meant support. When people looked at their neighbors, food was part of what they saw, not in detail but in feeling. Chicken felt reassuring. This quiet social meaning reinforced dietary choices. People repeated what felt right. Vegetables never disappeared, they remained essential, but they did not carry identity the way chicken did. By the end of the day, when families sat together, the presence of chicken brought a sense of normal life. It said things were holding together. Understanding this social side explains why chicken stayed important. It was not just food, it was a signal. In a world where survival was uncertain, food that quietly said, "We're doing okay," was worth keeping close.
By medieval times, food was not only fuel, it was emotional, even if people never described it that way. After long days of work, cold nights, and constant uncertainty, meals became one of the few moments that felt predictable. What people ate shaped how safe and settled they felt, even when life outside the home was rough. Chicken slowly became part of that emotional comfort, not because it was fancy or rare, but because it was familiar. People grew up with it. They heard chickens every morning. They collected eggs as part of daily routine. When chicken appeared in a meal, it felt normal in the best way. Vegetables did not create the same emotional response. They were everywhere, all the time, and closely tied to labor. People remembered bending over fields, pulling weeds, digging roots, and hauling baskets. Vegetables reminded people of work before they ever reached the table. Chicken, on the other hand, felt slightly removed from hard labor. Yes, chickens needed care, but not the same constant physical effort as gardens. This made chicken feel gentler, even relaxing compared to vegetables. Comfort also comes from habit. Medieval people ate many of the same meals over and over. When a food appeared regularly without causing problems, it earned trust. Chicken earned that trust early. Eggs were especially comforting. They were soft, warm, and easy to eat. They could be cooked quickly and eaten at almost any time of day. Eggs felt reliable when everything else felt uncertain. Vegetables were not always reliable in the same way. Some caused stomach trouble if eaten poorly prepared, others tasted bitter or bland depending on season. Chicken was more forgiving. Meals with chicken also felt more complete.
Even small amounts changed the feeling of a dish. A pot with vegetables alone felt like something was missing. A pot with a little chicken felt finished. This feeling mattered. Medieval people did not have many comforts. When something felt complete, it mattered more than we might expect today. Comfort also came from warmth. Chicken broth was deeply warming. It could be sipped slowly, shared easily, and stretched across many bowls. Vegetables alone did not produce the same rich warmth. Warm food mattered deeply in cold homes. Heat meant survival, not just pleasure. Chicken-based meals delivered that warmth efficiently. Another emotional layer was memory. People remembered good days through food. Celebrations, rest days, and moments of relief often included chicken. Vegetables appeared on all days, good and bad. Over time, chicken became linked with moments when life felt manageable. Vegetables became linked with endurance. This association influenced choices without anyone realizing it. When people had options, they leaned toward what felt comforting. There was also the issue of patience. Chicken meals often required waiting for eggs, waiting for birds to grow. This waiting created anticipation. Anticipation made meals feel more rewarding. Vegetables grew faster, but their arrival felt ordinary. Chicken felt earned. Comfort also came from smell. Chicken cooking filled a space with a rich, calming scent. Vegetables smelled earthy, sometimes sharp. Smell shapes emotion more than people realize. Inside small medieval homes, smell mattered a lot. One pot defined the atmosphere. Chicken made that atmosphere feel calm and settled. Another part of comfort was sharing. Chicken dishes were easier to share evenly. Small pieces could be divided fairly, broth could be poured for many. Vegetables were harder to divide without someone feeling shorted. Fairness mattered in households. Food that could be shared without tension became favored. Chicken also worked well across ages. Children, adults, and elders could all eat it. Vegetables were sometimes too tough or unpleasant for the very young or old. Food that worked for everyone became default food. Over time, these small emotional advantages added up. Chicken felt safe, it felt familiar, it felt kind. Vegetables remained necessary. They filled bellies and kept people alive, but they did not feel like relief. When days were hard, people did not want reminders of effort. They wanted reminders of stability. Chicken provided that reminder. Even repetition did not reduce this comfort. Eating chicken often did not feel boring. It felt dependable. Habit and comfort are powerful forces. They quietly guide behavior over generations. Medieval people did not analyze these feelings. They simply followed them. Chicken stayed on the table because it made life feel a little softer. Vegetables stayed because they were essential. But when comfort mattered, chicken usually won. In a world with few guarantees, familiar food became emotional shelter. And sometimes that mattered as much as survival itself.
In medieval times, food was never truly secure. Even when something was grown, gathered, or cooked, it was always at risk. Rot, insects, damp air, heat, cold, and simple bad luck could destroy food before it was eaten. Because of this, people constantly worried about waste, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, every day. This fear shaped diets more than most people realize. Vegetables were especially fragile. Once pulled from the ground, many began to weaken almost immediately. Leaves wilted, roots softened, moisture crept in. A basket of vegetables could look fine one day and be half ruined the next. This made vegetables stressful. People had to plan carefully. Eat them too slowly and they spoiled. Eat them too quickly and nothing remained for later. There was little middle ground. Chickens existed outside this problem. A living chicken did not spoil. It could wait. It could move through time safely. This alone made chickens incredibly valuable in a world without reliable preservation. Eggs added another layer of security. They lasted longer than many vegetables, especially when kept cool and dry. One egg going bad was a small loss. An entire pile of vegetables going bad could be a disaster. This difference changed how people felt about food. Vegetables created pressure. Chickens created calm.
Storage spaces were limited. Most homes had small cellars, shelves, or hooks. Vegetables needed careful placement and regular checking. Chickens needed space outside. They did not crowd storage areas. This freed indoor space for grain, which was far more critical to survival. Chickens indirectly protected grain by not competing for storage. Spoilage also affected taste and safety. Vegetables that spoiled slightly could cause sickness. People learned to be cautious. Chicken, when kept alive, avoided this risk entirely. Even cooked food had risks. Vegetable stews left too long could sour quickly. Chicken broth, when boiled again, lasted longer and felt safer. People trusted foods that behaved predictably. Chicken behaved predictably. Vegetables did not always. Fear of waste also influenced portion sizes. People hesitated to cook large amounts of vegetables unless they were sure they would be eaten. Chicken-based meals could be stretched slowly, reducing loss. This stretching mattered. A pot of chicken broth could last days. Vegetables often could not. Another issue was timing. Harvests arrived all at once. Vegetables flooded households briefly, then disappeared. This sudden abundance created stress. People worked hard to preserve what they could, but much was lost. Chickens smoothed this curve. They provided food steadily, not in overwhelming bursts. Steady food felt safer. Waste was not just about hunger, it was about effort. Every spoiled vegetable represented hours of work lost. This loss felt personal. Losing a chicken was painful too, but less frequent. Chickens did not spoil quietly in the corner. Their loss was clear and immediate, not slow and demoralizing. This difference affected trust. People trusted chickens more. Vegetables also attracted pests. Rodents and insects targeted stored produce. Chickens attracted less indoor attention. This reduced damage to homes. Even preservation methods favored chicken. Drying, salting, and turning meat into broth worked better than preserving many vegetables. This made chicken more adaptable. Over time, people learned what caused fewer problems. Fewer problems meant fewer worries. Chicken caused fewer worries. Fear of waste shaped habits slowly. People did not say, "We eat chicken because it spoils less." They simply noticed what disappeared and what stayed. What stayed became part of the regular diet. Vegetables remained important, but they required vigilance. Chickens required patience. In a tiring life, patience was easier than constant watching. This fear of waste also shaped emotional responses. Spoiled food caused frustration and sadness. Food that waited quietly caused relief. Chicken waited quietly. Homes were small. Storage was precious. Mistakes were costly. Chickens reduced mistakes. This made them feel safe, even comforting. By choosing food that lasted, people protected themselves from sudden loss. Over generations, this protection became habit. Chickens were not just food, they were insurance against waste. Vegetables were necessary but risky. When survival depended on avoiding loss, people chose the option that felt steady. Understanding this fear explains why chicken held such a strong place in medieval diets. It was not only about taste or tradition, it was about avoiding the quiet disaster of watching food rot away. In a world where nothing was guaranteed, food that could wait was priceless.
By the end of the medieval period, no one sat down and decided that chicken should matter more than vegetables. There was no meeting, no rule, no announcement. It happened quietly, slowly, and almost accidentally, and that is what makes it interesting. People did not choose chicken because they disliked vegetables. They chose chicken because it fit better into their lives. Medieval life was heavy. Days were long. Work was physical. The future was uncertain. Food had to do more than just fill a stomach. It had to reduce stress, save effort, avoid waste, and offer some feeling of stability. Chicken managed to do all of that at once. Vegetables were everywhere, but they demanded attention. They asked to be planted, protected, harvested, stored, checked, and eaten quickly. They reminded people of time limits. They reminded people of work. Chicken reminded people of continuity.
A chicken today was still a chicken tomorrow. Eggs arrived without warning, like small daily gifts. Broth could stretch across days. Nothing about chickens rushed people. That mattered more than we often realize. Medieval people lived surrounded by deadlines, weather deadlines, harvest deadlines, light fading deadlines. When something did not rush them, it became comforting. Chicken did not rush. Another reason chicken won was balance. It was not rare, but it was not too common. It was not luxurious, but it was not desperate. It sat perfectly in the middle. That middle space was where most people lived and wanted to stay. Vegetables leaned toward survival. Large amounts of vegetables meant you were getting by. Chicken suggested you were managing. Managing was the goal. Food also shaped memory. People remembered meals with chicken more clearly. They remembered warmth, fullness, and calm. Vegetables faded into background routine. Memory guides habit. Habit guides diet. Chicken also brought flexibility. It could appear in many forms without much effort. Eggs in the morning, broth at night, meat when needed. One animal, many solutions. Vegetables required planning to feel satisfying. Chicken required timing. Timing was easier than planning. There was also the issue of fairness. Chicken dishes could be shared evenly. Broth did not argue. Eggs could be counted. Vegetables often led to uneven portions and quiet disappointment. Households wanted peace at the table. Chicken helped with that. Over generations, these small advantages stacked up. No single reason explains it. Together, they became powerful. Chicken reduced waste, reduced worry, reduced effort, reduced tension. Vegetables did none of these things badly, but they did none of them especially well. So chicken stayed central. This does not mean medieval people ate meat constantly. Many days were simple. Many meals were mostly bread and vegetables. But when something extra appeared, when meals felt complete, chicken was usually involved. Chicken became the quiet backbone of everyday food life. It also shaped expectations. People grew up assuming chicken would be there sometimes. That assumption carried forward. Vegetables remained essential. They fed the population. They filled bellies. They kept people alive. But they were not emotionally or practically central in the same way. Chicken lived closer to the heart of daily life. By the later medieval period, this pattern felt natural. People did not question it. They simply followed what worked. And what worked was food that waited, stretched, shared, warmed, and calmed. Chicken did all of that. The story of medieval diets is not about preference in the modern sense. It's about survival with as little stress as possible. Chicken reduced stress. That is why it mattered. When we look back, it may seem strange that vegetables were not more celebrated, but medieval people were not thinking about balance charts or modern ideas of nutrition. They were thinking about getting through the week. Chicken helped them do that, quietly, reliably, without drama. And in a world full of uncertainty, that was more valuable than any grand idea about food. So when people ate chicken more often than vegetables in medieval times, it was not a mistake. It was a solution, a slow, practical, human solution. And like many such solutions, it lasted far longer than anyone ever planned.
When we imagine medieval eating today, it is easy to picture something dramatic. Huge feasts, piles of meat, tables overflowing with food. Or the opposite image, thin people sadly chewing roots in dark rooms. The truth was much quieter and much more ordinary. Most medieval meals were simple: a bowl, a loaf, a pot near the fire. People ate what worked, not what impressed. The medieval table was not about excitement. It was about getting through the day without trouble. Chicken fit into this reality almost perfectly. A normal meal often began with bread. Bread was the base of nearly everything. It filled space, gave energy, and could be eaten with almost anything. Alongside it came something wet: a stew, a broth, a mash. This is where chicken often appeared, not in big pieces, not dramatically, just enough to change the meal. A small bone, a shred of meat, a bit of fat floating on top. That was enough. It made the meal feel warmer, richer, and more complete. Vegetables were there too: onions, cabbage, greens, roots. They filled the pot.
they added bulk, but without something extra, the meal felt thin. Chicken provided that extra without requiring excess. This is what the medieval table really looked like, not meat-heavy, but meat-centered. Eggs played an even bigger role. Fried, boiled, mixed into dough, dropped into soups. Eggs appeared quietly and often. They were easy, quick, and reliable. They turned simple food into real food. Vegetables alone did not do that as easily. Meals were eaten slowly. People talked little. Food was not entertainment. It was relief. The relief of sitting down. The relief of warmth. The relief of knowing tomorrow's food was still alive outside. Chicken gave that reassurance. You could hear it moving while you ate. That sound mattered. It meant tomorrow was not empty. Another part of the medieval table was repetition. People ate the same foods again and again. This repetition was not boring to them. It was calming. When food is uncertain, familiarity is comfort. Chicken was familiar. Vegetables changed constantly with season and success. Chicken stayed chicken. Even the tools on the table reflected this. Spoons were common. Knives were shared. Forks were rare. Chicken stews and broths fit spoons well. Vegetables often needed cutting or chewing. Chicken-based meals were easier to eat. Ease mattered after long days. Meals were also social in a quiet way. Families eat together when possible. Food that could be shared fairly helped maintain peace. Chicken broth shared easily. Eggs could be counted. Vegetables were harder to divide without someone feeling shorted. No one wanted arguments at the table. The medieval table was also shaped by time. Meals followed daylight. There was no late-night eating. Supper came early. Food that warmed quickly and satisfied fast was valued. Chicken did that well. Vegetables alone often required more cooking to feel filling. That meant more fuel, more time, more effort. Chicken saved all three. Another truth is that medieval people did not think in categories the way we do. They did not separate meat meals and vegetable meals the same way we do. They thought in terms of full or thin, strong or weak, enough or not enough. Chicken moved meals toward enough. Vegetables kept meals from being nothing. That difference explains everything. When vegetables were abundant, they were used heavily. When they were scarce, they disappeared quickly. Chicken bridged those gaps. It stayed present across seasons. The medieval table was not luxurious, but it was thoughtful. Every choice reduced risk. Every habit came from experience. Chicken earned its place through usefulness, not desire. People trusted what did not surprise them. Chicken did not surprise. It behaved the same in winter and summer. It responded to care. It provided options. Vegetables were tied to chance. So when people sat at their tables, bowls in hand, they were not thinking about preference, they were thinking about stability. Chicken represented stability. That is why it appeared again and again, quietly shaping medieval diets. Not as a star, not as a symbol, but as a dependable presence. Understanding the medieval table means understanding this quiet logic. It was not about what people loved most. It was about what let them sleep without worry. Chicken helped them do that. And that is why when we look back, it seems to dominate the story, not because it was better food, but because it was safer food. And in medieval life, safe was everything.
By the time medieval life had settled into its familiar patterns, something quiet had happened. Choices that were once practical had become normal. Normal slowly became expected, and expected behavior repeated over generations turned into tradition. Food habits followed this path more than almost anything else. Chicken did not start as a tradition. It started as a solution. But once a solution works long enough, people stop seeing it as a choice. They see it as how things are done. Children grew up watching adults collect eggs, feed chickens, and plan meals around them. No one explained why. It did not need explaining. It was simply part of life. By the time those children grew older, they carried the same habits forward without questioning them. Vegetables were also part of this cycle, but in a different way. Gardening was taught as labor. Chicken keeping was taught as responsibility. That difference mattered.
One felt like work you endured, the other felt like care you managed. Tradition grows stronger when it feels natural. Chicken became tied to everyday knowledge. People learned how to cook it, stretch it, store it, and share it. These skills were passed down quietly. A pot placed on the fire, a bone saved for broth, an egg added at the right moment. This knowledge lived in hands, not books. Vegetables required knowledge too, but that knowledge changed often. Soil changed, weather changed, seeds failed, techniques shifted. Chicken care stayed mostly the same. Stability strengthens tradition. Over time, people stopped thinking of chicken as optional. It became assumed. A household without chickens felt incomplete, even if gardens were full. This did not mean everyone always had chickens. Loss happened, but the idea of having them remained the goal. Tradition also affects taste. When people grow up eating certain foods regularly, those foods become comforting. Comfort shapes desire. Chicken tasted like home. Vegetables tasted like effort. This does not mean vegetables were disliked, it means they did not carry emotional weight. Food traditions also shaped expectations around meals. A meal without vegetables was possible. A meal with some form of egg, broth, or animal flavor felt lacking. Even language reflected this. People described meals as strong or weak, rich or thin. Chicken made meals strong. Vegetables made them last. Strength mattered in a world built on physical labor. As habits became tradition, they also became resistant to change. Even when conditions improved in some areas, food patterns remained. People trusted what they knew. Chicken had earned trust. Another part of tradition is repetition across generations. When grandparents, parents, and children all eat similar foods, those foods feel timeless. Chicken felt timeless. Vegetables changed with season and region. Chicken stayed familiar across places. This helped spread chicken-centered diets beyond individual villages. As people moved, married, or traded, they carried habits with them. Tradition also softened memory of hardship. People remembered chicken as part of normal life, not as something once chosen to avoid loss. The reason faded, the habit stayed. That is how tradition works. It hides its origins. By the later medieval period, chicken felt like it had always been important, even though its role had grown slowly. Vegetables, while essential, did not gain the same traditional status. They were necessary, but not symbolic. Chicken became symbolic without ceremony. It symbolized stability, care, and continuity. Traditions also protect people from uncertainty. When life feels unpredictable, familiar routines offer comfort. Food traditions are especially powerful because they happen daily. Chicken appeared daily in some form, even if only as eggs or broth. That repetition reinforced its place. Even when new foods or methods appeared, chicken remained central. It adapted easily. It accepted change without losing identity. Vegetables struggled with this. New varieties came and went. Techniques shifted. Chicken stayed chicken. Tradition favors what adapts without disruption. By the time medieval life reached its later stages, diets were not designed, they were inherited. People did not ask why they ate the way they did, they trusted the past. Chicken represented the past working. Vegetables represented the present being managed. Both mattered, but in different ways. Understanding this final step explains why chicken remained dominant long after its original advantages were no longer obvious. It was no longer about storage or economics alone. It was about identity. Food that becomes tradition stops being questioned. Chicken crossed that line. It moved from solution to habit, from habit to expectation, from expectation to tradition. And once something becomes tradition, it shapes life quietly, steadily, and for a very long time. That is how chicken earned its lasting place on the medieval table, not through force, not through desire, but through time.
In the medieval world, meals were not designed for flavor alone, or for extravagance, or even for variety. Meals were designed for survival, efficiency, and quiet practicality. Every choice around the table had a reason, even if that reason was not spoken out loud. And over time, these small, practical choices formed the quiet logic that guided almost every household's diet. Chicken fit perfectly into this logic. It was small, versatile, and predictable. It provided nourishment without unnecessary complication. People did not need to debate whether chicken was preferable to vegetables. Experience had already decided that for them. Its advantages became invisible, taken for granted, and part of the rhythm of daily life. Vegetables were essential, but they were less forgiving. Their usefulness depended on season, weather, and soil conditions. A root that thrived one year could fail the next. Cabbage could be plentiful in fall but scarce by spring. Even when vegetables were available, they required careful preparation to avoid stomach problems or spoilage. Their unpredictability made them less central in the practical logic of the table. Chicken, in contrast, was reliable. Eggs appeared regularly without much effort. Broth could be made repeatedly from the same bones. Meat could be cooked and stretched over multiple meals. This predictability reduced risk. It allowed people to plan meals with confidence, knowing that nourishment would arrive when needed. In a world where uncertainty was constant, such reliability was invaluable. Another part of the logic was labor management. Gardens demanded work from planting to harvest, weeding to storing. Chickens required care, but that care was manageable. They fed themselves to a degree, found some of their own food, and multiplied naturally. Small daily attention brought a steady return. This efficiency made chickens preferable for busy households that had to balance multiple chores. Comfort also played a role. Medieval life was physically demanding. A meal had to restore energy, warm the body, and feel satisfying. Chicken provided warmth and substance, whether as broth, stew, or roasted pieces. Vegetables, while nourishing, often lacked the same immediate effect. They filled bellies but did not carry the same comforting sensation. Over generations, people came to associate chicken with relief and stability. This emotional factor, while unspoken, was as influential as practical concerns. Economics intertwined with this logic as well. Chickens acted as a form of living wealth. A family could sell an egg, trade a bird, or use it as payment for a favor. Vegetables, which spoiled quickly and were difficult to transport, offered fewer opportunities in this regard. The quiet presence of a chicken in the yard represented options and security, which reinforced its central place in household thinking. Another aspect was waste management. Food that spoiled was not just disappointing, it could be dangerous. Vegetables rotted quickly if not consumed or preserved correctly. Chickens, when alive, did not spoil. Even after death, their meat could be preserved with relative ease through boiling, salting, or drying. This reduced anxiety over loss. People instinctively trusted foods that could endure minor mistakes. Chicken endured. Vegetables demanded constant attention. The social dimension of meals also reinforced this logic. Meals were shared within households and sometimes with neighbors. Chicken could be divided fairly, stretched into broths, or offered in portions that satisfied multiple people. Vegetables were less adaptable in this way. One family member might end up with a large portion, while another received very little. Chicken's flexibility in serving made it socially useful, as well as nutritionally valuable. Memory and habit were also critical. Children grew up observing which foods appeared most frequently and which meals felt complete. Chicken consistently provided warmth, satisfaction, and continuity. Vegetables were part of the routine, but rarely carried the same emotional weight. These early impressions shaped preferences and reinforced the practical logic that had developed over generations. Even small details mattered. Chicken cooking created a pleasant aroma, signaling nourishment and warmth. Eggs were quick to prepare, providing food when time or fuel was limited. Bones could flavor multiple dishes. Vegetables alone rarely offered these multiple advantages simultaneously. Chicken worked across multiple dimensions: nutrition, comfort, reliability, social ease, and efficiency. By combining all these factors, a quiet logic emerged.
Chicken was central not because it was inherently superior, but because it solved multiple problems simultaneously. It reduced risk, saved labor, provided comfort, offered economic options, minimized waste, and adapted to social needs. Vegetables were necessary, but rarely solved as many problems at once. This logic was invisible to medieval people. They did not consciously tally up these advantages. They did not deliberate over each meal. They acted according to experience, habit, and observation. Chicken simply became the food that worked, again and again, in countless households across generations. Understanding this logic helps explain medieval diets more clearly than simply saying they liked chicken better. It shows how practical thinking, shaped by necessity, labor, and risk, guided food choices. Chicken's dominance was the result of countless small, rational decisions accumulated over decades, quietly reinforcing its role in the household diet. By the end of the day, when families gathered around a pot of stew or a bowl of broth, these choices had already been made long before the meal appeared on the table. The logic was silent but strong. Chicken had earned its place not through extravagance, preference, or fashion, but because it made life easier, safer, and warmer. It worked. Vegetables supported. Chicken led. In the end, the medieval table was shaped less by taste and more by practical wisdom passed down through generations. The quiet logic of survival, comfort, efficiency, and reliability made chicken the backbone of the meal, while vegetables remained essential, supportive players. This balance was the invisible structure of medieval diets and the reason why chicken quietly won over vegetables in daily life.